The difference between an Iron player and a Challenger player is the accumulation of knowledge. If you ever watch a high ELO game, there are lots of tricks that each player does that you might not catch or understand why they do it. These small interactions might not seem like a big difference, but the higher up the ladder you go, the more important these things become. As you face better players, the games become more optimized, and getting that tiny edge can be the difference between winning and losing a game. I have videos that go over fundamentals and champion specific guides, but I wanted to start this general tips and tricks series that covers random but important interactions. These tips and tricks will range from beginner to advanced, so all ranks can learn something new. Let's jump right in. Starting off the list, I'm going to cover a lot of vision mechanics. When you are sweeping a ward, the enemy will have lingering vision of the area for 5 seconds after you clear it. Knowing this trick, you can manipulate the enemy into thinking you are going one way by pathing a certain direction and then looping back once the vision is gone. That only works for trinkets and regular wards. When you clear a control ward, the vision immediately disappears. Next vision trick, if you are sweeping wards with red trinket, make sure to let your team last hit the ward so you can share gold. Yellow trinkets give 10 gold while regular wards give 30 gold. If you are the person sweeping, you get the full amount regardless if you last hit it or not, so if you sweep the ward and let a teammate last hit it, you will generate more gold for your team. A mechanic that they introduced in Season 13 is that you will get 5 gold initially if you ping the ward or if you are the first person to hit it. If you do get that initial 5 gold, that will be taken out of the gold at the end. In this example, Bard gets the 5 gold for pinging the ward being placed down, and when Jinx last hits it, Bard gets 10 gold while Jinx gets 5 gold because this is a yellow trinket. You can see the gold values stacked on Jinx. The first one under is 10 gold, but there's a -5 on top because Bard initially pinged it. This works for control wards as well. If you are the person that puts down the control ward, let an ally last hit it because you will both get gold. In the end, you double the net gold compared to clearing it yourself, so always let your team last hit the ward if you are sweeping. Another important vision technique is the placement of wards in bushes. You always want to place wards at the edges of bushes so you can maximize the amount of vision it gives. Avoid placing them in areas that don't utilize the full range. For control wards, don't place them in spots that the enemy can easily reach. Place them more towards your team's side so it's a lot more dangerous for the enemy to clear. Another important vision tip is to never hit a ward that's disabled when doing an objective. Hitting the ward gives vision to the enemy, so wait until after the objective is over to clear it. Moving on, Scuttlecrab has a very misleading vision mechanic. If you kill Scuttle, it looks like it covers any enemies crossing, but you can actually walk through the topside river into the pit and not get spotted. In this example, the Bard gets spotted walking into the pit from the bot side, but he's able to go in and out from the top side. If we go back 15 seconds and see it from Bard's perspective, you can see him walk through without getting the icon that he has spotted. I stutter stepped here on accident, but you can just walk through by hugging the wall. This only works on the topside river for the pit. It does not work on the dragon side. Knowing this, you can look to sneak, herald, or baron even if the enemy has crab up. Moving on from vision, Baron has some interesting mechanics. He gives 2 debuffs when you fight him. One of them is a resistance debuff called Void Corruption. Every attack you take from Baron is a stack that reduces your armor and MR by 0.5 that can stack up to 100 times. The other debuff is Baron's Gaze, which makes it so that Baron takes 50% reduced damage from the unit that it has most recently attacked for 8 seconds. This is only effective for 1 unit at a time, so it immediately drops when someone else rotates tanking it. This is super important to know when you are on a time crunch, because if you are playing something that's not DPS, you should tank Baron so that the DPS can kill Baron faster. Another interesting thing about Baron is that you take more damage if you are behind him. If you stand behind Baron, he has a spike attack that hits a lot faster than if you were in the front. Try to avoid staying behind Baron. Also, on a side note, if the enemy is ever clearing a ward in either pit, hit the objective to make it hit the enemy. The next thing I want to cover are plant spawns. Here's a map that highlights the spawns of all of them on the untransformed map. Blast cones, which are highlighted in the red, have different spawn times and ranges depending on if they are in the inner or outer spawn. The inner cones spawn between 115 and 125 and respawn between 5 and 7 minutes, while the outer cones spawn between 5 and 5:30 with respawn times between 5.5 minutes and 6.5 minutes. Honey fruits can spawn anywhere along the green sides of the wall, starting near the pits and slowly branching out to lanes. The first spawns are between 6 and 6:30, respawning between 5.5 and 7 minutes. There will be 1 on each side of the river. Out of all of the plants, the spawn timers for honey fruits is the most useful, so if you're going to remember one plant timer, it's this one. Scryer's Bloom spawns between 3 and 3:30 to the nearest side lanes. Once one of them is destroyed, they respawn between 5 and 6.5 minutes at either spawn point. There can only be 1 per quadrant. These next two things will be a little bit more niche and a preview of how part 2 will be. If an ally is ever ulting or teleporting, you should always look to buff them with an ability so you can get an assist if they get a kill. The last trick for this video is very advanced. If you're waiting for a laner to come back and the enemy minions are under tower, you can last hit and stall longer if you kill the minions as the tower attacks. If you farm the wave this way, it buys a lot more time as opposed to farming the minions right when it's low enough. The key is to wait for the tower shot that would kill to be shot out and then to farm the minions while it is flying. Those are all the tips for part 1. Part 2 will be a lot more like the last two. If you have any tips and tricks you'd like to share, leave them in the comments and I might pick them for part 2. I always enjoy hearing about these small things. Thank you so much for watching, I'll see you all next week.